And I am live. Hello, and thank you for watching tonight's live stream. Gordon Causey, as it always is, live and unscripted. That's how I do most of my videos, pretty much all of them. Not all, but close. This is Candy the Wonder Dog, who should have been named COVID or Corona, given that she came into the house on March 18th of 2020. Tonight was one of those nights where I was ruminating over the course of the day as to would I do a live, and if I do a live, what am I going to talk about? Was thinking of talking about the fact that I'm still seeing too many people wearing masks, as far as I'm concerned, and about the science, what science there is of masking. I actually pulled up a bunch of articles, but I decided, you know what, that's kind of yesterday's news. No one cares about masks anymore. Hardly anyone wears them, although I would guesstimate that it's somewhere, 7, 8%, under 10%, but it's noticeable. But my dog always gets a treat at the start of my videos. That's the way they begin. So shake, lay down. I got to get it out. Lay down, speak, speak, speak. Don't chuff. Speak, speak. There we go. Sometimes she has trouble finding her voice, and she does. I think it's called chuffing. She got a bacon treat, so she is happy. Where are we? Today is Saturday, the 22nd of February, 2025, just after 10:15 p.m., 10:19 according to my computer. So I started this a couple minutes later than what I had initially scheduled it for. I schedule lives, and that's what YouTube requires you. They don't require you can go right away. I got Brett Skinner from the great state of Wyoming, writing that the world is pretty quiet, in my opinion. Yeah, it is. There are some things on the horizon. The Pope Francis, is apparently very seriously, critically ill. He's 87 or 88 years of age. And the way I look at it is, once you once you get into your 80s, to a degree, I start to think you're playing on the house's money. Some individuals, though, can remain incredibly sharp right into past 100. But I think that's rare. Typically, we find cases like your former president Joe Biden. That's more the norm. Cognitive decline and health decline set in. Trump is a bit of an anomaly. I think he's 78 years of age now, and I don't see any discernible difference between Trump of 2016 to 2020 and the Trump of today. I think he's as sharp as he was back then. I know that Trump is such a polarizing figure, and that's kind of when I made the thumbnail for tonight's live, which I did just before going live. There seems to be only one of two options. You either have to love everything about Trump or hate everything about Trump. And that plays out certainly here on YouTube on so many different stations. You have YouTube channels that Trump walks on water, can do no wrong, everything he does is wonderful. And likewise, the opposing side of the coin, where nothing Trump does is good and everything he does is horrible. And has the world gotten that bad that we cannot be in between, where we can't it's like even your spouse. You may love your spouse to death, but 99.9999% of all marriages, I can promise you, there are certain things that annoy. But why is it that? I don't know. It's almost like a loyalty test. Are you loyal to the liberal cause, or are you loyal to Donald Trump? And I find it somewhat annoying. What has kind of caused me to what has caused my wheels to start spinning recently is the news about Trump, more or less, I'm going to frame it as cleaning house within the senior military leadership of the United States. Primarily, the big bombshell was dismissing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon, a gentleman by the name of C.Q. Brown. I don't know what the CQ stands for. I'll share the story with you. It's as reported by, I think it's Reuters. Uh, let's go. Sharing the screen. There it is. The article, scroll to the top. And we're seeing this word all the time now in relation to the reporting on Donald Trump. It's everything is unprecedented. Everything Trump does is without precedence, it seems. And this was written today, February 22nd at 2:33 Eastern Time, updated 5 hours ago. So we're 10 o'clock now. It was updated around 5:30. And here's what the article is saying. Yeah, it's sharing. Trump announces unprecedented military leadership shakeup. He's to nominate Canadians, we say lieutenant. Lieutenant General Dan Raisin Kane, as Brown's successor. Defense Secretary Hegseth skeptical of Brown's appointment. And it says President Donald Trump on Friday fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Air Force General C.Q. Brown, and pushed out 5 other admirals and generals in an unprecedented shakeup of U.S. military leadership. Trump said in a post on Truth Social he would nominate former Lieutenant General Dan Raisin Kane to succeed Brown, breaking with tradition by pulling someone out of retirement for the first time to become the top military officer. The president will also replace the head of the U.S. Navy, a position held by Admiral Lisa Franchetti, that's how I'm going to pronounce it, the first woman to lead a military service, as well as the Air Force Vice Chief of Staff, the Pentagon said. He's also removing the Judge Advocates General for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, critical positions that ensure enforcement of military justice. That's the JAG. And there's a gentleman who has been on the station before. His name is Wayne. I forget his full name, username, but it's Esquire. He's a lawyer. I believe from the great state of Tennessee. And Wayne, I believe he's presented himself as having worked for the JAG, the Judge Advocate General, before. So we have somewhat a cleaning of house happening militarily within the United States of America. And Evening to Hank Holiday was shown up. It looks like I've got two on the commenting in the live chat. I've got 2 Americans and 1 Canadian. Hank is from Texas, Brett from Wyoming, and Whale Oil Beef is from, who's also commenting, he is from British Columbia, Canada. For you Americans, that's the province directly north from Washington State on the West Coast, which just had an earthquake, measuring either 4.7 or 5.1, depending on the reporting that you're listening to, which is significant. A 5.1, you'll feel that. But my biggest on a war footing. And is he preparing for the U.S.? Is the U.S. getting ready for war? We've seen the talk of Trump admonishing Panama for ceding control over ports on either side, on the Atlantic and Pacific side, to Chinese companies that were formerly Hong Kong companies, but of course, Hong Kong became once again part of China after Great Britain had a lease on Hong Kong. And I think it was a 99 or 100-year lease, and I think it came to an end sometime in 2000 or 2001. and mainland China reincorporated Hong Kong into the People's Republic of China. And so these two companies managing the ports on the Atlantic and Pacific side on either end of the Panama Canal, the company managing these are Hong Kong companies, but now Hong Kong is part of the People's Republic of China, which is right now kind of battling it out, not kind of. They are battling it out with the United States to be the world's preeminent economic and military superpower. And I've said it many times on my channel that the US is the declining world power and China is the power on the rise. And I think that decline, America's decline on the world stage, I think that certainly accelerated under the Biden administration. That's my own editorial comment, my own opinion. And it strikes me that Trump is trying to reverse that trend, but the devil is always in the details. And if you're going to go up against a nation like China with a basic dictatorship, things can get messy when you're leading a democratic republic. And it can be harder because democracy is messy. Democracy is often called by people far smarter than me. It's long been said that democracy is the worst form of government, with the only advantage being that it is better than all the alternatives. Let me read what's being written. Whale Oil, who is in British Columbia, and I would assume most British Columbians live in or near Vancouver. That's the most populous city in the province. He's writing that he was in the dentist chair when the EQ struck and he didn't feel a thing. Were you on nitrous oxide, that laughing gas, that stuff that makes the dentist almost pleasant? Were you on nitrous? If I was going to have to live through an earthquake, nitrous might not be a bad way to get through it. MHR, Miss Hellraiser, is wishing everyone a good evening. Brett is writing, he doesn't think the United States is going to war. I think people are just able to see the war machine churning always. Remember, the war machine is always at work. Fair enough. That's a fair comment. The industrial military complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned Americans and the world about as he vacated the presidency. I guess that would have been in, what year? 1960. He would have left. John F. Kennedy would have been inaugurated in early 1961. And it's customary, I believe, for outgoing US presidents to give something of an address to the nation as they vacate the Oval Office. And Dwight D. Eisenhower, having served 2 terms, did that. And part of his speech was a warning about the rise of the industrial military complex. And for the industrial military complex, peace is bad for business. It does not improve. It does not impact. It has peace is lowers dividends. Peace lowers share prices. So it's in the best interest of the industrial military complex to foment the conditions that bring about war and conflict. People buying planes, missiles, tanks, armaments, all the war. Military is big. It's massive business. I remember from the Vietnam War, there was a song by a guy named Country Joe Fish, which was and it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me. I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no reason to wonder why. Whoopee, we're all gonna die. And then one of the lyrics is, "Now come on, Wall Street, don't be slow. Why, man, this is war, a go go. There's lots of good money to be made, supplying the army with the tools of the trade. Just hope and pray that when they drop the bomb, that it lands on the Viet Cong." And it's one, two, three. What are we fighting for? He sang it at Woodstock. Not that I was there. I am old, but I'm not that old. I was born in 1966. I don't know when Woodstock happened. I think it was 68 or 69. So I was alive, but not old enough to have experienced it. If I'd been there, I would have been in diapers. Actually, at that time, we were living in New York State in Staten Island, which is one of the boroughs of New York City, but no memory of it. Anyway, let me read on. And MHR is also in British Columbia. And she's writing that she was in the shower when the earthquake hit and didn't notice. Thank God. 5.1, 4.7. I think the initial reports had it at 5.1, and later reports lowered that to 4.7. And I find that's pretty common. I find with all the earthquakes that are happening in the Greek islands around Santorini, same thing. You get reports of a 4 or 5, and then it's dropped a few decimal points. There was just a large earthquake, I think up in around 7 in the Caribbean Sea, somewhere off the coast of Puerto Rico, that area. And no damage, no tsunamis. But initially, I think it was 7, and then they lowered it a bit. And I think that's pretty standard. And 5 is not catastrophic. When you start getting up in and around 6, though, things get scary. And on the Richter scale, as I recall, every point up the Richter scale is 10 times more violent shaking than so a 5 is 10 times more violent than a 4, and a 6 is 10 times more violent than a 5. And every time you go up, you get up to 8, and now you're in serious trouble. So 5 is pretty, it's noticeable, but I don't even think there are any reports of any damage in British Columbia. And MHR is from Metro Vancouver, Surrey, BC. So in the greater Vancouver area, as it were. As I say, I think probably 80% of people in British Columbia live, probably within an hour's drive of downtown Vancouver. And then MHR further writes that she wants everyone to know that Vancouver is turning into a 15-minute city. Most on my channel will be aware, I think, of what this concept of 15-minute cities being proposed involves. It's the idea that everything you need, all your day-to-day needs, groceries, schools, doctors, dentists, whatever, everything that you would need to access on a day-to-day basis is within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. And conceptually, I think it's not a bad idea. Have little neighborhoods that have everything at your disposal, 15 minutes. The concern that many, including myself, have is that at some point, are they going to enforce people remaining within their 15-minute cities? I think it's the city of Oxford in England, which has kind of been a test case where they put up bollards and tracking type IT systems, internet technology to track people when they leave. And there's only so many times in a year or in a month that an individual is allowed to leave their 15-minute zone. And it's this kind of Orwellian dystopian world that we seem to be moving toward. And I'm looking at President Donald Trump in the United States, kind of tie things back to him and the subject line of this video, as being something of a bulwark against that. But at the same time, getting back to Brett's comment about, and I'll read it again, I don't think the USA is going to war. I think people are just able to see the war machine churning. It's always churning. And The only thing is, we haven't seen before the United States try to reclaim the Panama Canal, control over it, and that the US built, it was the United States that built the Panama Canal, but then during the Carter administration, he was president from 1976 to 1980. Actually, in point of fact, he gets elected in 76, becomes president in 77, and serves until early 1981, I think sometime in February. Sometime during the Carter administration, the control of the Panama Canal was given over to the Panamanians for the cost symbolic of one whole US dollar. Woohoo. And that a shipping lane such as the Panama Canal, if you think in terms of military and moving about troops, goods, armaments, everything, that's a vitally important geopolitical little canal. And then likewise, Greenland, the overtures that Trump has made concerning acquiring or taking over Greenland, that's another geopolitical little game that has militaristic overtones to it, possibly. Yeah, it could be the minerals, it could be the resources, it could be the but it could also be strategic. Likewise, Trump's overtures about making Canada the 51st state. And these are all things that I don't think it's unfair to at least to have your radar up and to be concerned about it. I wouldn't lose sleep over it, but at the same time, it's something for myself personally, it's on my radar. Let's see if there's anything else being written. Whale Oil Beef is writing, I'd like to know whether Flynn was on the good side or not. Pastor Arthur Pawlowski met with him in 2021. When you're talking about Flynn, I'll need some background. Who's Flynn? I know I never met Art Pawlowski. For anyone who forgets the name, he was the Calgary area pastor who was jailed 2 or 3 times. They dragged him out of his car along the highway at one point, who famously, and then I don't know what actually ended up happening, but at the Coots border crossing in Alberta, between Alberta and maybe the state of Wyoming or Montana, I'm not sure what state to the south borders Alberta, and maybe it's more than one. But there's a border crossing there called the Coots border crossing, and Art Pawlowski went there as a speaker, and he was facing, I think, criminal charges over his involvement with that border protest, which was happening in tandem with the border protest all the way in Ottawa. And you think about it, someone living in Ottawa or someone living in and around Ottawa, I mean, how long would it take you to drive to Alberta? It takes you forever just to get out of the province of Ontario. It's an 8-hour drive from Toronto up to Sault Ste. Marie, another 8-hour drive to Thunder Bay, and then a day's drive probably to Winnipeg, another day's drive to Regina, another day drive to, you're probably looking at, 4 or 5 days of driving 8 hours, 9 hours a day. So people who wanted to protest out west, it was far easier to go to Coots, Alberta, than it was to go all the way to Ottawa. And I don't know what happened, if he was convicted, if he was given time served or suspended sentence, or what happened. The only encounter I had with Art Pawlowski was in 2021 in December. I went to an event that was being held in Whitby, Ontario, which is about an hour from where I live, at a college there. And it was an event hosted by a group called the Democracy Fund. And the keynote speaker was a woman by the name of Julia Panesi, was a professor of ethics at Western University in Ontario, London, Ontario. And she had been fired from her job, let go as a professor, tenured professor, for refusing to get the COVID jab. And so she was the keynote speaker, but they also had faith leaders uh, joining by video conference, one of whom was Art Pulowski. Another was Phil Hutchins, who had been jailed in St. John, New Brunswick. Both Pulowski and Hutchins refused to close their churches, and they disobeyed the COVID mandates, which we've long since found out. Fauci admitted it, that um, it's in a USA article that I was reading just today, rereading, about Fauci admitting that there was no science behind so many of the mandates, like social distancing, and about putting masks on kids. The USA article had him admitting that there was no science behind this, no clinical trials, just stuff. But we all remember what Fauci said. He said, "I am the science," and that's a dangerous mindset. And you need checks and balances. And to draw this back to Trump, Trump needs checks and balances. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I do have some concerns about Trump. Again, I think I wrote this down in the description to this video, that if I had been an American, I would have had no compunction whatsoever about putting an X next to Trump's name, or pulling that lever, or doing however, touching whatever part of the screen. Every state in the United States governs its own federal elections. They have different ways of doing it in every state. Some states you go into a booth and pull a lever. Some states you do it on a touch screen. Some you scan your ballot. It's not like Canada, where there's a universal system across the board governed federally. There it's done at the state level. But I would have voted for Trump if I had been an American. I wanted him to win. And I'm not going to say I made a mistake, because Biden wasn't the president. Biden was just occupying a chair, and someone had their hand operating his mouth and telling him what to say and what to sign. And I don't think he half the time knew what he was signing. Let's see what further is being written. MHR is writing, once the social credit score comes into play, people will not be able to leave the 15-minute area. We're likely heading over to Arizona. Developers are buying up all the land here. For those unaware, Vancouver, you might as well be living in China. It's very, and I'm trying to remember the name of the town. There's a part of BC, a part of Metro Vancouver, and maybe it's Surrey, I don't know. That is, Chinese money has been flowing in there for decades, for 20, 30 years. And a lot of people from Vancouver have remarked that you're more likely to hear Chinese Mandarin being spoken on the street than you are to hear English. And this thing about social credit score, we almost have it to a degree here in Canada already, in the sense that people look to boost their social credit score, but it's a perception thing right now. If you put a sign on your lawn saying, "I got the shot," you boosted your social credit score. If you wore, if you followed the stickers down the floor and you wore your face diaper, you boosted your social credit score. And if you raise a transgender child, if your child is raised to be confused about the fabric of reality, well then, oh, I'm raising a gender neutral child. Aren't I a wonderful person? I actually saw this on social media. Someone in my friend network, someone I actually know, who was so proud to announce to the world that my daughter is now gender fluid and this is its new name. Oh, yeah. And the messages she got on her post on Facebook were, "Oh, you must be so proud. You've done such an amazing job. You're such an amazing mom." And I'm like, And for what it's worth, if anyone's curious, I didn't wade in. I wanted to, but it was one of those things where I just said, you know what, I'm going to get creamed in this forum. I'll be engaged, I'll be getting attacked from all sides, and I won't be able to leave this thread for a month with everyone trying to get the last word. And guilty as, I'm as guilty as anyone. I like to get the last word in too. And so I just said, I'm going to leave it. But that's the world that we're in, is people get programmed by the culture, by the media, by our government about what is expected. You know, you've got to be, liberal woke, or else everyone else is programmed to jump all over you. And at some point, we may get into that Chinese type system that they brought in where it's an actual numerical score. And then your rights, or rather your privileges within the society, are determined by your social credit score. Okay, you come late to work, down goes your score. You jaywalk, down goes your score. You speak out against woke liberal idiocy, your score goes down. And then you want to travel. Well, I'm sorry, you're restricted. Your social credit score is too low. If you're a young person and you want to go to a street party or a rave, well, your social credit score is too low. And that's the type of system they have now in China. And could they bring it here? I should remind everyone that Justin Trudeau, our soon to be outgoing prime minister, announced to a women's voting group all the way back in 2015 that he had a degree of admiration for China because their basic dictatorship allowed them to move far faster than our slow, crappy democratic system. And our democratic system is slow. It is slow. Dictators move far faster. Dictatorships don't have to worry about things like the rule of law. You just change the law. And we're getting on something of a war footing, I find, globally. And I think back to when we've been in war before. Look at what happened in Canada, and I think as well in the United States during the Second World War with I think they were called internment camps, and Canadians of Japanese descent, lost everything they owned, their property, their possessions. They were put into quote unquote jail based on their ancestry. And in some cases, these were individuals who were second and third generation Canadians. They were interred rather, not interned, interred for the duration of the Second World War. And once the the World War ended, they were released and basically just start your life over from zero. And that happened in a democratic country and the population accepted it. Now I'm wondering, could you do that? This liberal left woke mob, would they allow it? Would they allow that kind of trampling of basic human rights? And so I'm approaching things from two different angles here. I'm kind of going down the middle. I like Trump. I like what he's done, a lot of what he's done. So I'm very leery of Elon Musk and what he's doing. I do like the idea, obviously, in Canada and the US, certainly the US, but I think it's even worse here in Canada. We have these bureaucracies that just basically they're make work projects for do nothing bureaucrats, people who work in the civil service, civil servants. There's an old joke that goes, why does a civil servant never open the window in the morning? Because if they open the window in the morning, they've got nothing to do the rest of the day. And there are a lot in Canada and the US, and what a lot of civil servants who really value add, there is none. There's zero value add. They're not contributing anything. They're hampering things. They're making life more difficult. They're putting in red tape to justify their positions. They're they've just announced in Canada, the federal government is reducing by half the barriers to trade within our own country. At the federal level, we have all kinds of rules and regulations and forms and everything that if you're going to interprovincially trade, if you're gonna transport goods across provincial borders, well, you got to go through all these government agencies in order to do it. Well, they're eliminating, they say, half of those restrictions to improve trade among the provinces. But you never hear anything in this country about people like what is happening in the US, about people losing their jobs, about government actually cutting the waste. Those people will still be working. They'll just probably be doing less paper shuffling, which was all they were doing before. Let me catch up. A few more things are being written. And Hank Holiday is asking, you mean the Panama Canal by the Gulf of America? There's something to talk about. The Gulf of America, formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico. Associated Press is still referring to it as the Gulf of Mexico, which has drawn the ire of the Trump administration and has led to the Associated Press being denied certain privileges when it comes to accessing the president on Air Force One. I think they're still allowed into the daily briefings given by his press secretary, the young woman whose name escapes me right now. Very young, very young woman, but very well spoken, incredibly articulate, incredibly feisty. She's a bit of a pit bull, but you have to be in that position. And the woman she preceded was a pit bull as well. We've gone from a pit bull, a woke liberal left pit bull, to a right wing pit bull, but pit bulls both ways. But anyway, I think when they have those daily briefings, I don't know if in Washington, where the press secretary is talking to everyone. I think the AP is still allowed in those, but I don't think they're being given to they are not being given access to the Oval Office, and they are not being allowed onto Air Force One and other close, intimate contact with President Trump. And the reason is because they continue to refer to that body of water off the coast of Texas, Florida, down through Mexico. They're calling it the Gulf. They're still calling it the Gulf of Mexico. And Trump has renamed it the Gulf of America. And it leads me to ask, freedom of speech. What's in a name? What's in a name? We get, the right gets all upset about if you, rather, the left would get all upset if you misgendered somebody. If some guy likes to dress up as a woman and you refer to him as he, then you would be accused of misgendering, which in Canada could bring a human rights complaint. An individual could be dragged before the Human Rights Commission and may be forced into educational retraining, the thought police. This world has gone crazy. And it's like we've got a battle between the crazies on the left and the crazies on the right. I did a podcast style interview with a friend of mine, retired firefighter, Petawawa area, gentleman by the name of Jack Lapierre. I invite you to watch it. He made mention of that common bromide about the pendulum, how it swings. It seems to go from 9 o'clock and things are really bad. Make 9 o'clock, we'll call that the left. And then 3 o'clock on the right, remember I'm reversed on the screen. So you got the left and you have the right, and it gets so far over to one extreme, and then it swings back. And instead of staying, around 6 o'clock where things are balanced and good and, reasonable, No, instead it just keeps going to 3, and when things get really bad the other way, and then it starts swinging back. And Frank was, putting forth this notion that we need someone who can keep it between, say 4 and 7, and not let it swing all the way up to 9 and then all the way up to 3. Let me catch up with what is being said. Um, that's the one. Okay, I got to catch up here. Uh, okay, I'm caught up, or I found out where I was. MHR, Miss Hillis Razor is writing, the talk of UBI is literally making me sick, universal basic income, which is an idea that has been punted repeatedly by our liberal intelligentsia in Canada, and probably in the United States as well. But I know it's been punted a lot by NDP types and some liberals. And it would not surprise me to see Mr. WEF Mark Carney, when he becomes prime minister March 9th, 10th, if he doesn't jump on that bandwagon as well. However, I suspect what he'll do is wait until after an election, and if he gets elected, which I'm going against the grain, but I do think a liberal victory under Mark Carney. I'm not predicting it, but I'm not dismissing it as an impossibility, as a lot of people are doing. A lot of people who I know, conservative minded people, have said, no way, the liberals have no chance. However, they are individuals who have never voted liberal once in their entire lifetimes, and they're completely within their echo chamber. I'm not. I do my best to stay out of my echo chamber. I do my best to interact with people of varying viewpoints. And so I hear the liberal side, and I argue it. I try to argue it intelligently, but I'm speaking as an individual who has voted all across the spectrum over the course of my 30, 40 years of voting. I guess 40 now. And start voting at 18, and I'm 58 now. So I've been voting for 40 years. I don't know if there was an election the year I turned 18, but whatever the case. I have voted Liberal, I have voted NDP, I have voted Conservative, I have voted PPC, all at the federal level. So there's 4 of the parties that run candidates nationally. The only party I haven't voted for is Green. And when I was in Quebec, I'll drop a bomb for my Quebec followers, people who are subscribed to the channel. There are a few from Quebec. I even voted Parti Québécois one time. One time, Parti Québécois. Never voted CAC. I voted Liberal once, which is more or less the Conservative Party of Quebec. It's crazy, the political situation in Quebec. I voted for Jean Charest's Liberals one election, and Pauline Marois' Péquiste in the next. I was there for 2 election cycles. So, and both times I voted on the losing side. When I voted for Jean Charest and his Liberal Party, the Parti Québécois won. And then when the next election came and I voted for the Parti Québécois, they were defeated by, I think, by the CAC, maybe. I'm not sure. Anyway, let me read on. Uh, Whale Oil Beef is telling me who Flynn is. General Michael Flynn became a national security advisor to Trump for his 2016 presidential campaign. I've heard the name, don't know enough about it to speak to it intelligently or even reasonably well. I've heard the name Michael Flynn, but Whale Oil Beef then writes, Richmond, where the airport is where the Chinese have adopted. Thank you. That's it, Richmond, because there's a part of Toronto called Richmond as well. And likewise, a large Chinese population. MHR is writing, where I live in Surrey, it's honestly 75% East Indian, very outnumbered at this point. This is what's so interesting for me, having moved to this little tiny town of Brighton, Ontario, which to me, I feel like I've gone back in time. I feel like it's the 1970s. Because what has happened here is in Brighton, it was always going back forever. It's always been a predominantly white area, East or European Canadians of European descent. Sounds racist to say white, but whatever. Um, Predominantly white area here. And then what's happened, the town has grown over the last number of years, last 15, 20 years. This town has been growing. But what's been happening is a lot of people are leaving the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. They're moving east. They want to get back. They want to go back in time. And typically, what's happening is it's people who are selling their houses in the GTA, getting their $1 million or more, and then fleeing out here. And what's happening is in the GTA, there is no single dominant racial group. I believe European descended Canadians are the largest minority, but they are a minority. There is no single dominant group. And actually, I love going to Toronto for that very reason. I like the variety of food. If you want Korean, if you want Thai, if you want Chinese, good Chinese, not like what we get out here. I like Hakka Chinese. I like Hakka noodles and chili chicken, and you can get great Hakka noodles and chili chicken in Toronto. You can't even get it at all out here. So there are benefits to living in a diverse area. But anyway, just going on. MHR writes that I read that. MHR is of the opinion that Vancouver is mostly Chinese run. Brett is writing, and remember, Brett is in Wyoming. Social credit score equals violence, and that it will never work in America. Certainly won't work in Trump's America, and that's a good thing. Mud Duck Farmer is here. Is writing past wars against thoughts, but who is bad? This is one thing that was occurring to me as I was debating over what I would talk about tonight is the fact that I think those of us on the right need to recognize that it used to be the right wing, conservative minded individuals who were often the ones promoting censorship. Look at books like Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger, or Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, or even Huckleberry Finn and Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. I've read all of those books. I've read Catcher in the Rye. Yeah, I read all those. I've read all those, and I almost felt compelled to read them because they were being banned in so many places, particularly or mostly in the United States, if not exclusively in the United States. The conservative minded individuals were getting those books removed from reading lists in schools and school libraries and even public libraries. And, there's that old line, no fruit is so sweet as that which is forbidden. And man, if you want to get me to read a book, tell me that I can't, and then I'm going to seek it out. But that was the conservative minded individuals who were seeking to ban books. And there's nothing pornographic about Catcher in the Rye or Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird or Huckleberry Finn or even Slaughterhouse-Five. I remember reading Kurt Vonnegut's one of my favorite authors. I've read many of his books. And he actually said that having his book Slaughterhouse-Five banned was great for his career because it boot people. Oh, I can't read that. Why not? What else has this guy written? And for what it's worth, my favorite Kurt Vonnegut book of all time, and one of my top books of all time, is called Cat's Cradle. If you ever want to read it, you talk about a dystopian weird novel, strange, scatologically strange novel. Cat's Cradle, very small. Anyway, let me read. Cryptomary is wishing everyone a good weekend, hopefully. And Cryptomary does not miss the lower mainland. Happy being on Vancouver Island. It's so weird. British Columbia, the geography. Vancouver Island is where Victoria is. Vancouver isn't on the, it's weird. It's weird the way, you would think that Vancouver would be on Vancouver Island, but no, Victoria, which is the capital, is on Vancouver Island. Anyway, um, Cryptomeria loves Cloverdale, loves seeing the trains. And Whale Beef is headed to the island tomorrow. Nice. Let's see what MHR is writing. She writes, I am a realist to the point of being a pessimist. I believe the idea that Canada is a sovereign country or that there is any sort of democracy is over. I think Canada is done like dinner. I almost feel like, in many respects, Canada already is the 51st state in because we've ceded our economic sovereignty to the United States when we signed on to the Free Trade Agreement in 1988 and then expanded it to include Mexico, I think, in 1994. Yeah, and that ceded our economic sovereignty. So it was only a matter of time before our political sovereignty followed suit. It's been 50-ish years, 40, 50 years. How long? No, 12, 30, coming up on 40 years ago. So it took some time. We've held on, but now when we sell more products into the US than we do within our own borders. And how are we able to do that? A big part of it is because our dollar is only worth 70 cents or so. So there's we've got a massive discount to a massive advantage over US producers. If you're making that, that common widgets, if you're making that common example, widgets, when Canada's producing them, ours are with a 70-cent dollar. How are Americans going to compete? And so our widgets flood the market. Let's see. Cryptomeria is writing, I'm a good captain. If Canada is going down like the Titanic, I'm dancing with the band. So patriotic to the end, Cryptomeria is saying. He's gonna go down with the ship. He's gonna go down waving the Canadian flag. I'm not that nationalistic, obviously. I think that's clear. I do love this country. I think we have distinct advantages. The biggest advantage that Canada has over the United States is race relations. We have race problems. We do have racism in Canada, but it is not on the same scale as what exists in the US. And that's a positive. That's a huge positive. Could things be better here? Yeah, they could, but they could also be a lot worse. And they could be a lot better in the United States. Brett is saying, valid point, freedom of speech. However, can I then call DC Beijing about Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico? Oh man, just got freedom of speech. I'm something of a freedom of speech absolutist. Gets me into trouble because, especially on the left, I find the left is very adept. They use this social credit score. They use public shaming as their modus operandi to get people to bend the knee and to give in to their agenda. They want to shame you. And good luck. Good luck shaming me. Guess what? I don't care what you think. What matters at the end of the day, I'm not going to be judged by you. I answer to something higher. So if you think shaming me is going to get me to hold my tongue, good luck with that. Uh, Mud Duck Farmer asks a very pertinent question: where's the middle? And that's a fair question. My definition of 6 o'clock on that pendulum going back and forth, my definition of six is probably different from Mud Ducks or from everyone has their own definition of where six is. And that's why I think Jack, you talked about it being basically between somewhere between 4 and 7 before things get too far. And maybe we can find broader agreement if we widen the parameters a bit, because there, and we live in a world now where the youth, where the young people are being taught to tear down everything if it's not perfect. And perfection is impossible. It's that old line: perfection is the enemy of the good. And that's something was there a lot bad in the Biden administration? It's one thing I liked in reading Donald Trump when he did let this CQ Brown, this chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon, when he let the gentleman go, he spoke glowingly of him in a tweet, either on Truth Social or Twitter. I'm just going to go, they have the wording of it in here. Yeah, this is what Trump wrote. And I thought this was well done. This was presidential. He wrote, I want to thank General Charles C.Q. Brown for his over 40 years of service to our country, including as our current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is a fine gentleman and an outstanding leader, and I wish a great future for him and his family. And that is good to see. So often with Trump, we see a very low IQ, very dumb person, not very smart at all, and he denigrates. It's nice to see him being gracious. And, it's this idea of the perfect is the enemy of the good. You don't like the guy, he doesn't align with your agenda, you don't see him as being the best individual to lead the military in the fashion you want it led. So you're going to replace him, but at the same time, you don't have to denigrate him. You don't have to diminish him. Instead, he built him up, and that's nice to see. Anyway, let me read on, and then I'm gonna end this rambly little video that really didn't have much of a point, but I do enjoy the conversation. Just trying to catch up. Mud Duck, where's the middle? Mud Duck writing, do remember how to solder. I hate that word because it's spelled SOLDER, but it's pronounced without the L. You solder something. I think that's what you're referring to. Mud Duck writes, I read all the books, never thought about race, read for class. And Whale Oil's writing, in my opinion, Canada's great advantage is natural resource abundance per capita, for sure. We have our forests, minerals, iron ore, nickel, and even lithium in Quebec, I think, is where we have some large untapped lithium deposits. Why are we getting it from South America, Asia? That's the primary. Afghanistan is said to have large lithium deposits. Why is everyone always invading Afghanistan? The Brits tried to take it over, the Russians tried to take it over, the West tried to take it over. What's the big deal about Afghanistan? There's a few reasons. There's a lot of resources there, and it's in a very geopolitically sensitive location. It's almost like the hub of a wheel with, Pakistan, Iran, China, all it touches all of them. India as well, I think. Anyway, I think I've gone on long enough, pretty darn near an hour. Well, Oil Beef brings it up. Yes, I almost forgot about that one. Opium. Oh, yeah. When the Taliban took over, word is that they kiboshed pretty much all, probably not 100%, but close to 100% of the opium crop, which is where you get heroin from. And there's a lot of speculation that when the US moved into Afghanistan, that helped revive the opium crop, and that the US, for their black or dark or clandestine operations, that they finance it through drug money. And nothing should surprise anyone in this crazy world. There's corruption on corruption on corruption. And just to wrap it up and put a bow on it, does Trump walk on water? Is he incapable of being corrupted? Is he incapable of making a mistake? Of course, he is not. Of course, he can make mistakes. Of course, he could be corrupt or become corrupted. And I think those of us on the right, conservative minded individuals, need to have our eyes open to the fact and to not lose our capacity for criticism and for critical thinking, and to just blindly go along with, well, Trump did it, so it's got to be good. The same way that happens on the other side of the aisle when people say, oh, well, Trudeau's doing it, Trudeau's good. Trudeau's good, Poilievre's bad. Trump is good, Biden's bad, or vice versa. And we need to get out of this dynamic, and we need to start discussing ideas and not personalities. I'll end off with Cryptomeria. He's writing, I know you all pray. Can you send me a little one on your list about work? I'm having such equipment issues. So I invite everyone to pray for Cryptomeria for his equipment issues. Pray that everyone here, can find peace, comfort, blessings poured out. And I'll remind you of an acronym that I learned at the church I attend now, Pentecostal Church, and it's there on the wall. PUSH, pray until something happens. Pray without ceasing. That's an admonishment in Scripture. I'm sure it's in the Psalms somewhere. Pray without ceasing. So I'll end my video the way I always do. Firstly, I'll ask you to like and subscribe, as I often do. Appreciate the subscriptions. And lastly, to receive this blessing from the book of Numbers. Let the words soak in, let them seep in. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. And he will, even in a crazy, upside down world, goodness knows where we're going, we can know that this life is temporary. We're going to our eternal home. And there will be peace, there will be comfort, there will be joy. And Mud Duck Farmer, just getting in one last little word, that is of the opinion that there are none of these rare earth minerals and such in Ukraine, that it's all a scam. I think the world, I genuinely believe the world, this is my opinion, I genuinely think the world is heading toward war. We've already got war going on between Ukraine and Russia, war going on between Israel, between Israel and Hamas, ceasefire or no, that's just waiting to start again. There's a civil war raging in Sudan. There's been a civil war in Yemen, civil war in Syria. Things are very unsettled right now. And I think we're in a period where we're gearing up. We're gearing up to it, and everyone's getting their ducks in a row. I think that's what Trump is doing. I think he's trying to get an administration that aligns with the way he sees the world going. Is Trump directing it, or is he merely preparing for it? I tend to think he's preparing, but we'll see. At any rate, God bless, and we'll probably talk to you tomorrow or the next night, either Sunday or Monday. Night, everyone.